one of the things that happens a lot with multi-generational families, the wealth starts at the first generation and they assume the values are being passed down to each generation. But by the third generation, it's a different culture. It's a different society. With more money, you have an obligation and you have more opportunity. That can be paralyzing for folks to try to figure out how to be good at that opportunity. The more people you have involved, the more complicated it gets. Ultimately, the family are the ones who can destroy the family business. Because if they do not agree, they can go about bringing down to collectively.
Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show, where we want to help you to inject more love, legacy, and lifestyle into your family business. And my guest today is Ginni Galicinao, who is an advisor for high net worth families regarding family governance and all sorts of cool stuff. And I'll get into her bio in a second, but this conversation that we had today was really great because we talked a lot about family governance, which is a big topic and it can go in many different directions. And a lot of times families don't even know where to start with family governance. And a lot of them don't know that they need to start with this, but it is such an important topic to get the family aligned around a common vision and values and really how to navigate that wealth. And Ginni herself has so much experience and expertise. She was the protege to one of the key individuals who started this legacy planning, Jay Hughes. And if you don't know who that is, go and find his books. He's got incredible books on legacy. But Ginni herself is has such an amazing track record for helping high net worth families, to the point where even if you're wouldn't consider yourself high net worth, or you don't own private jets, or you don't have a multi nine-figure business or anything like that, even if you're just starting out and you have these kinds of topics around governance and family systems and family charters are so important to think about, so that you can organize your family as it grows around common values, so that you can set up the right kinds of expectations and requirements and all of that, to make sure that you are all aligned and you're all working effectively, so that you learn to work well together and you succeed and you're sustainable together. So here's a little bit about Ginni. Ginni's company is called Dynamics of Family Wealth, and she's been working with families of wealth and in family businesses for over 20 plus years. She's a family dynamics and family enterprise coach and consultant, and she works with high net worth individuals in particular, with families and their families and businesses and enterprises. And she's been doing that for over 2 decades. She has a goal of helping families flourish in all areas of their lives. She's really known for her ability to guide families and family businesses through difficult conversations. We all know what those are, right? And a lot of conflict resolution, which of course we also know about as family business people. And that includes the family governance process, creating and learning and educational programs for the next generation, succession and leadership planning and transitions. So she's going to be sharing a large variety of tools and resources and her expertise, which spans well over 2 decades, with us today. This is a great interview. Hope you enjoy it. Please enjoy my interview with Ginni Galicinao. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show. I am really excited you're here today because we're gonna have a real great conversation about some bigger topics that we haven't talked about yet, which is like family governance and more of the structures that we want to put in place to be successful and sustainable. And my guest today, Ginni Galicinao, I hope I pronounced that right again, because when you're on the spot, I practiced and now I'm on the spot, so I just wanted to make sure I got it right. But Ginni's here with me to talk about that. She's an expert on this subject and has been in this world of family business and governance and supporting high net worth families for over 2 decades now. So Ginni, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here with you, Adam. Thank you. And yeah, you got my name right.
Yes, thank you. Well, good. That's those small victories at the very beginning help.
Right.
So that's great. So I'd love to hear a little bit. I want to kind of just get started and hear a little bit about your story, how you got into the world of family business, and how you developed this passion to help families of high net worth to structure their governance.
Okay, sure. So I actually started in the world of philanthropy first. And at some point, I decided to go into private practice. And as I entered it, the interesting thing I discovered is that many families were saying to me, Ginni, we're thinking of spending down the family foundation because we cannot get our next generation or the rising generation involved. And I was so perplexed by this, that why don't they want to get involved? And we discovered is that the reason why they don't want to get involved is because they had never learned how to answer the "Are you rich?" question. And they felt that they were going to suddenly be outed when their friends found out that they had the capacity to give away hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars for buildings, etc. And their parents had never really helped them or prepared them for the incoming wealth or how to actually deal with all of this. And as I spoke with the parents, I'd say, well, how are you helping them answer the "Are you rich?" question? And they would say to me, we don't know how to answer that either. And the other thing they would say to me is, well, they need to be good stewards of the wealth. And I would say, that's great. What does that mean? And they would say, well, we don't know what that means either. So it was actually a really fascinating beginning. And through this process, I had also become good friends with Jay Hughes. I don't know if you know that name, but Jay is considered one of the godfathers, the grandfathers of the whole industry, and has written numerous books on the cycle of the gift. And I was fortunate in that he told me that he felt like the industry needed someone like me and that he would mentor me. So I was very fortunate to be his protege for a while. And because I have a strategic planning background and a business background, and I'm an executive coach, and I have partnered with financial advisors and been working with these ultra high net worth individuals for years, it was a really easy melding for me to begin the process of having families. Well, number one, first, start to have these difficult conversations. And it's really interesting. Many people get into this field thinking what I will do is help people have these difficult conversations. And it is a wonderful first step to be able to have the difficult conversations and to figure out how to make your way through conflict and come up with processes for conflict resolution. But, what I really found was over time is that, for families of wealth, life is so complex. And people don't really understand why it's so complex. And then when you throw in a family business, it just can go off the wire. So if you want, I can talk just a little bit about that complexity in terms of, have you heard of the 3-circle model? Adam?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have. And I think it would be valuable for our listeners to hear that. I mean, if they haven't already, because I think it's a really compelling model. So, yeah, please share.
Yeah, it's a great visual. So if anybody wants to draw while I'm talking about this, it might be helpful. But anyway, imagine that there are 3 circles. And in one circle, you have the family. So the family could be anybody. It could be the direct bloodline. It could be the spouses. It could be, if you have multiple branches, it's now 4 branches. And if you have multiple generations, the horizontal line goes up and down. So you've got a vertical line and an up and down line, but it's made up of the family. Then the other circle is called owners. And in the owner circles are the people who actually own the wealth. Now, interestingly, a lot of people just assume that if you're a member of the family, that you're automatically an owner. And in most cases, that is not true. But you do have people in the family who are acting like they are owners and believe that they have the ability to influence or make decisions for the owners. And it can become very complex and conflicting. And then you have a third circle that is the family enterprise. And in the family enterprise is every tangible asset that the family owns. So it could be houses, airplanes, cars, boats, investments, philanthropy, and a family business or two.
Mm-hmm.
So so now you start adding in these three different circles with all of the people in these different circles, and each circle has very unique needs and demands and desires, and they're very important to them when you're in your circle. So now if you can imagine these three circles merging into three interlocking circles, where they overlap is can be crazy, because you can just imagine that you now have somebody who is an owner of the company, who also is a manager of some of the assets in the family enterprise, and they also happen to be the patriarch. And that you have that person wearing three different hats. And then you have someone who is a child, an adult child, who just received his inheritance and is thinking that he may or may not want to work in the family business and has some expectations about what that means. But you have people over on the enterprise side who are thinking, no, we don't want that person working in the family business.
Right.
So you can,
yes.
So you can imagine how conflicting this can become. And so when we talk about family governance, truly all family governance is a way for families to learn how to work together and make decisions together. And I know for a lot of families, that combination of these two words is very weird. Family and governments. I mean, what is this? We're not a country. And then the other word that we hear thrown around is the family constitution, which is also kind of a strange word for families and family businesses. And again, a constitution is nothing more than a charter or an agreement. Mm-hmm. So should I pause for a moment, Adam, or should I keep on going?
No, that's a great start into what we're talking about, because, and I'm really glad you shared the three circles model there. And if you're listening and struggling to conceptualize that, picture a Venn diagram with that family, the family enterprise, and then the owner of the wealth. And there's a lot of ways that can look. And, when I first learned about that, having not known about that, the complexities were overwhelming, to be a leader of a family business or a family enterprise, and not to understand the dynamics and not to understand the differing and overlapping dynamics of family, business, and the ownership side of it. It was overwhelming. So once that, just having the knowledge of that model and how it's organized was a very liberating concept to realize, okay, we can look at these almost, as overlapping things, but also as individual entities that we kind of need to structure in some way. And I guess, and it sounds like that's what you're saying. That's where the governance side of it comes in to really help with that.
Yeah. The Harvard Business School created an interesting model where they put everybody in rooms. And it's kind of like, when you are in this room as a family member, these are the decisions you are allowed to make. If you are in this room as a member of a family council, I realize I'm jumping ahead. That's what the decisions you get to make. And this is how the family can communicate their voice up the chain to the board of directors and the CEO of the company. Because oftentimes what you have happening is you have family members crossing the walls or crossing the lines and going right to the CEO or family members and passing on their wishes. So I'll share with you kind of a funny little story. But one day, the wife of the wife of one of the brothers on one of the G3 lines walked into the office and said, "Wow, you all are dressed so casually. I think you need to dress nicer." So the people in the office started dressing up. And then the CEO came in after traveling and said, what is going on here? Why are you all dressed like this? And they said, well, because so-and-so's wife came in and told us we had to have a dress code and we needed to start dressing better. And he said, she doesn't have any right to do that.
Right.
Yeah, because she was a family member, she felt that she could come in and do something like that. I've also seen situations where the uncle will call one of the stores and announce what they think should be happening, that store manager should be doing. But the uncle doesn't work in the company. He happens to be an owner, so he gets a distribution. And he also is a family member, but he's not a manager of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of what happens is the confusion that we have in families of wealth where they feel like, well, I own the family business. Why don't I have a say in what's going on? And why can't I just walk in and share my wisdom or my instructions? So
yeah. And that's always, I mean, that resonates certainly with the challenging family dynamic, especially the farther down in the generations you go, you're getting into second cousins and maybe even people that don't necessarily know each other. And I think, we can go really deep on this subject, and I want to go deeper. And I also want to kind of address something you said somewhat towards the beginning about, the family wealth questions and maybe some of the reluctance on family enterprises or high net worth families to maybe be public about that information or share that information, or even internally talk about it. So I wonder kind of where your thoughts are on the "Are you rich?" questions, and maybe does that contribute to an avoidance of asking those questions internally, so that we're not, I guess, out of a fear of like maybe imposing some entitlement or some kind of judgment of others. But on the other hand, now we're not getting the critical kind of structure or governance solved because we're avoiding those questions. I don't know if that question makes sense, but
yes, it does, because nice people don't talk about money. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a nice person, you're not supposed to talk about the money. And as you're growing up, your parents will say, oh, well, we're very private, so we don't talk about this. And so as a child, you learn not to talk about it. The other thing that happens is parents will say to their children, well, Johnny wants to know if we're rich. And the parent will say to their child, tell Johnny that you're not rich, you don't have any money, your parents are. So the child now grows up their whole life always saying, well, I don't have any money, it's my parents. Now the child is 21 years old, and the first trust comes down, and suddenly there's, oftentimes it's like $1 million that will show up in that trust. Mm-hmm. But they don't have access to it because it's controlled by these trustees. So once again, you're told, it's private, we don't talk about it. There's some money for you in a trust. It's over there. You can't access it without talking to that person that you don't know, who's now the trustee, who you have to go to ask for permission for money. So instead of in the past where you went to your parents and asked for money, you're now going to some stranger and asking for money. And it can cause a lot of infantilization that happens. So think about it. You've been going to your dad for years asking for money. Now let's say you're 40 at this point, and you're still going to some stranger who is acting like your dad to ask him for money. Mm-hmm. So at some level, you have never really claimed any emotional ownership around what that is. So in the work that I do with families, which goes to the second part of your question of how do you help people start to answer this question, is the biggest work is trying to help the family understand who are we and who are we as individuals? What is our culture? What is all this wealth about? What are our individual values? I think it's so important for young adults to be very clear about who they are as individuals. Mm-hmm. And then how are we as individuals part of the family values, and what are those? I think one of the things that happens a lot with multi-generational families, the wealth starts at the first generation, and they assume the values are being passed down to each generation. But by the third generation, it's a different culture. It's a different society. Life is very different. And it's hard if you try to impose. It's not that you don't want the original values to be shared with the family and to be honored, respected, but there has to be some room for growth and change and evolution for the family so that you're not always having to be your great, great, great grandfather who doesn't have a clue about the world of AI,
Right.
for instance, right?
Right.
Much less airplanes. So it's so important that, families work together to hear about what everybody's individual values are, then to work together to be clear about what their values are as a family, because it it creates a foundation for who they represent. So you can always go back when you are confused about what to do. You know where to go back for where you stand. And then there's a phase that you go through where you create the vision and mission for the family, not the family business, but who are we as a family, and creating what I call the family wealth mission statement, which is not a balance sheet about the money, but rather a balance sheet of the intangible sides of wealth.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like all that work that you're talking about there as far as creating the culture questions, the value, and the family wealth mission statement. It sounds like, and we were talking about this on our pre-call yesterday. It sounds like that work should be preceding the governance structure. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Because what you're doing while you're going through all of this, I call it's all part of the governance process, if you will, because what you're doing while what's happening while you're doing this work is you are learning how to communicate together. You are duking it out over these values that may seem confusing to you. Right. I'll give you an example of one family. We were doing the family values. The dad had his values. He had put down that his top value was adventure. The kid said, "Dad, you're a couch potato. Are you kidding? How can that be your top value?" And he said, "Well, because I like to have fun in my investments. I don't want it to be boring. I want it to be kind of exciting, and I want it to be fun." And he said, "And I also have the value of safety. So I'm not jumping off any ledges without a parachute." So, and the kids were like, "Oh, how interesting." And that's a whole different conversation about what it's like to grow up in the land of, I call giants, of these big successful people, where you're afraid to take risk because who can be that successful? So that was a very eye-opening thing for these kids to see, oh, it's okay. It's okay to take risk and have fun with all of this. So what was I... I wanted to share with you one thing too, that it happened. So it's a crazy hand movement, but you've heard me talk about the fact that there's different forms of wealth. So there's your financial capital, there's your human capital, social, spiritual, and intellectual capital. And traditionally what happens is when we have money, the first person we go to is the financial people and the lawyers. And they say, we're going to do this, we're going here, and your other human capital and spiritual capital, like, what the heck? Where are we going? I didn't know we were going to go over here and invest in that. I don't think I believe in that. So the work we do is we flip this whole equation over and really work on strengthening who the family and the individual is from the human, social, spiritual, intellectual capital side. And then the money is simply a pedestal on which all of this can grow and thrive. And the decisions are made from the humanity perspective, the human capital perspective. And the money is simply this pedestal on which all of this can grow and thrive, as opposed to the other way, where often our parents, the wealth creators, will say, well, we created all the money, and your job is to keep growing it. Yeah. But they don't talk about growing you as an individual. It's about growing the money as opposed to growing you. And
I love
so,
that. I love that visual, by the way, and I'll share for anyone
yeah.
who's just listening and it wasn't watching. Yeah, that the visual is basically counting those types of capital on your hand and having your thumb as the financial piece of the capital. Usually, that thumb's pointing up as you demonstrated
Mm-hmm.
it. But
Mm-hmm.
when you flip it, instead of the financial piece leading, you have the human elements, the human capital, and the spiritual capital. All those elements leading the other one. I hope I captured
Mm-hmm.
that correctly.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for describing it visually. Because,
Yes.
yeah, you're right. Not everybody's watching this on YouTube. So, but and so when you become clear about who you are from those other perspectives, it
Hmm.
becomes so much easier to answer the "Are you rich?" question.
Yeah. Wow,
And
that's
how
great.
Yeah, and how everybody answers it is different. So there is no one pat answer to the "Are you rich?" question. Uh,
Hmm.
but it is definitely not continually telling your kids that you don't have any money. I have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all mine, because then now you're 30 and 40 and you still don't know how to answer the "Are you rich?" question.
Yeah. Well, how would you suggest that we talk to our kids about wealth? I mean, I can understand kind of some of the scarcity mindset that might go into kids when
Mm-hmm.
their parents might be saying things like, "Well, this isn't your money; it's our money," and blah blah blah. Or they might get the other end of it where there's maybe an entitlement perspective where they do learn they're wealthy or they're rich, and they don't have any context for that necessarily. So what suggestions would you have to maybe talk to kids about the wealth and the financial part of it?
I think the really important thing is for kids to start understanding the value of money.
Hmm.
I mean, oftentimes they just see these plastic credit cards that you're using, and they never touch it and they never handle it. And so one of the biggest things is what I'm guessing you've heard of the banks with three banks, that spend, save, share version.
Yes.
That. So I think for young ones, that's really good, because it gives them the opportunity to save for something that they want. And the story that goes behind that is how grandpa or grandma went through creating a business and saved money through investing, whatever, right? So
Right.
that you can show them, when you're saving money, this is an opportunity for you to make it grow the way grandma and grandpa did. And
Hmm.
so it may be they get to buy a bike when they're younger, but as they get to be older, it might be having them learn more about investing. I remember one of my clients came to me and she said, I can't remember what she was in. I can't remember if she was in junior high or high school, but she went to her dad and they were talking about some company, and the dad said, "Well, maybe it's time for you to learn a little bit about that.
Hmm.
You actually own some stock in that company." And she was like, "I do?" And he said, "Yeah. So let's set this up so that you can start to manage it and watch it grow or not and make decisions around it." So I think the more you give your kids an opportunity to understand and learn about money, touch it, do something with it, lose it, most
Hmm.
importantly, lose it, and realize that losing it is not such a bad deal.
Right.
Um, so and then the other part of it is the generosity part. How do they really learn to be generous? And what does that mean? Because it doesn't, it was so interesting. One other family talked about how I think it was their 12 or 13-year-old daughter. She talked about how uncomfortable she was because when they would go to Starbucks, her friends expected her to treat everybody.
Oh, wow.
And the mother said, "Well, you know what? I'm now in my 30s and I have that same problem."
Hmm.
So how do you help kids learn how to stand on their own and not feel like just because people know they have money that they are expected to treat everybody to everything? I
Yeah.
think, the other one that's kind of interesting are vacations. Oftentimes people like to they go on vacations and you want to take their friends with them. Hate to say it, sometimes it means toning down the vacation, you
Right.
know, so,
Yeah.
so that you maybe, um, well, you maybe still fly on the private jet, but maybe it's not as luxurious as it might have always been. But it's as one parent said to me, at the end of the day, we had to really have a conversation between ourselves of what was our end goal? Was our end goal to be able to enjoy all this luxury, or was the end goal to really have our children be raised to be good, discerning, thoughtful, caring individuals who understood that the wealth was a privilege and it was also an opportunity, and to be able to embrace that as opposed to take it on as an obligation and a burden, because opportunity and obligation together can talk about another complex thing, another crazy Venn diagram, right?
Right.
Because we're all told, with more money comes more responsibility, and with more money you have you have an obligation and you have more opportunity. That can be paralyzing for folks to try to figure out how to be good at that opportunity thing, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you burden with the obligation. So, it's funny. These are like big conversations, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And these are the type of conversations you start to have with your children or in family retreats, to be very honest. I call them family retreats. A lot of people call them family meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of them as a retreat because it's not always about the money. It's really about the family and who the family is. Family meetings traditionally have all the lawyers and the accountants show up. Not that you won't have them show up at a family retreat. I just think it sends a different message to the family that we're not going to sit around a conference table with all the black suits and have this really scary legal conversation where you don't really understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But instead, yeah.
Well, to your point about the more human sides of the capital kind of guiding that financial piece instead of the other way around, I think that's really telling, because there is a lot of responsibility, and even for people that may not, for those of us in the room that may not have private jets or a massive amount of family wealth or anything like that, it may seem on the surface that, oh wow, living the life, that's an extraordinary life. But there is a lot of responsibility. There is a lot of obligation, and money does not drive that happiness factor or that lifestyle factor. It is all of those other four human capital sides of it that seem to draw that. So to that point, I think that's a great unifier where anybody on the spectrum, if you're raising a family, whether you've got a small mom and pop shop or whether you're an enormous family enterprise, you can start these conversations now about how to build that mindset in, how to have those structures. So I'd love to kind of talk about what the value of that governance structure. Like what you mentioned, kind of what it is, learning to work together, putting that structure together. But why is it important? And maybe how does that structure of governance play a role in a family's sustainability?
So let's just do the family side. I want to talk about governance on the business side, because that gets so much more complicated. But on the family side, when you think about it, especially as your children are becoming adults, now they're having trust. Often all of the maintenance of that trust is delegated to somebody else. So part of what you want to do on the governance side, as you're creating a family charter, which would include your values, your vision and mission statement about who you are as a family, this wealth mission statement, what is this money all about anyway? What's it for? Then other things come into play, like how do we communicate with each other? Interestingly, for family members, social media. I have one family where this is a big debate for the 20-year-olds who wanted to be able to use their very famous last name on Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, and partly because that's how they get discovered for jobs.
Sure.
But the family did not want their big name out there. So what about that? Or even how do you, as a family member, let's say you get to use your name. Are you allowed to put your political leanings on there? Because some families are concerned that it will send a message to the world that your family feels a certain way, and they may not.
Right.
So, or even, this was really sad. One of the family members actually fell into some addiction issues, and he actually started posting things on there while he was lost. And so people, including his cousins, saw those posts, and it was extremely painful for them to see all of that. So
Yeah.
interestingly, social media became part of the family charter. What type of things do we put out there? Something we may not even think about, but that could be out there. Shared assets. So almost many families have the main house, and they often have like one vacation home or something.
Sure.
Boy, the fighting that okay, my family, we have a beach house. Oh, oh my gosh! The fighting that goes on over that beach house, and now as all the prior generations are passing, and it's now come down to just the four siblings. We've had to do a lot of work to create agreements on what does this mean about this beach house? How do we agree to let it go? How do we sell it? Who gets to use it? What if they use it? Do they have to hire a housekeeper afterwards? I mean, what if I show up after she was there and it's a disaster? That pisses me off, right?
Right.
But things that seem so trivial can become so big for a family. It's a lot about how do we support each other? You know, what does communication look like for us? How do we resolve conflict? It's so all those types of things go into what the family charter might look like, so that it's clear about what the family is. Here's the important thing: is you don't just create this document and then say it's a one and done deal and walk away from it. It's something you have to revisit almost annually to say, do these values still apply? Is adventure still one of our top values, or have we become more conservative now?
Right.
Or does this mission still fit us? What about the social media one? Are we in a different place now? Do we want to change that? So the key is that you're continually revisiting these documents, these structures, if you will, and trying to decide if they still work for you. Because you want it to be a living document. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words that you created at some meeting that you might as well put in a file cabinet and not even bother it was a waste of time.
Right.
But you want it to work for you and your family. The other great thing about this family governance, family charter work is, and the family retreat work, is that if you come together and you have branches of the family, it's an opportunity to hear what other people are doing and what's challenging in their life. Like, for instance, the one cousin who became addicted, they could have jumped in earlier if they had known.
Right.
So it's an opportunity to be there to support each other. Now, fortunately for that family, I'd worked with them for a number of years. He came out on the other side, and we were able to have him share his story with his cousins about what happened, and for him to say, I'm here for you. As you all head off to college. It can be scary, especially if you go from this small town to this huge university. It can be scary, and that's what happened to him. I'm here for you. So that's a wonderful thing about these family retreats, where you have time to really get to know each other again, because often you play with each other when you're 4 and 5, then you go to different schools, you lose track of each other, and you don't really know each other later on, and you're not able to support each other. You judge each other instead of learning to support each other. So that's
Yeah.
part of this whole governance process is becoming a family.
Yeah. I love that aspect because there's, there's probably countless examples of families out there that haven't developed a charter, that haven't put in the structure in place, and they're ever expanding. They're, passing their assets on to the next generation without putting any thought into this. So I guess my question is how do we start the process? When do we start that process of putting in a charter, of working through our values and governance structure, and if it's something that we're entering into that process, maybe later down the line into the third or fourth or fifth generation, how do we convince those that are owners, that are in those family and ownership circles, that we need that structure?
Yeah, it's so interesting for family businesses. Traditionally, what you have is a board of directors who's only, I'm thinking about a family I'm working with right now, it is only about the business.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And here I am saying, well, we can't leave the family behind, and as one person, the mother is often saying, money is nothing without family. And the adult, I say children, so these are adults. They're like, well, it's really great to have this, but if we lose our family, was it worth it?
Yeah.
So how do you convince people? I mean, there's no way. I think the first way to help people understand that the owners is to share with them those circles.
Yeah.
To kind of to go through the conversation of, okay, Dad, what circle are you in? What circle am I in? And to be able to share with each other, what are the questions that you have when you're in those different circles? What are the needs that you have when you're in those different circles? I can think of some owners, I think, again, another client, where they have no say in how the distributions are made. They're actually made on the family business side by this board of directors who is, their focus is on growing the business.
Right.
But you have some owners and family members who may not care how big the business grows. They might like it to just maintain, and they might like for their distributions to be bigger than they have been for whatever reason.
Right.
Is it worth a conversation? Absolutely. Is it worth a conversation about what does this family business mean to the family as a whole? Is it just about the money? Is there something more there that the family feels like it stands for? I'm going to get this completely wrong, but I know there's a saying, there's a family business and a business family. And, so my friend Doug Box is one of those two. I can never remember this. But the problem is if you are, let's see, let's say a family, I don't know. Let's say it's family business where your whole identity is wrapped into the family business. When that family had to sell, the siblings could not get along. This is another reason to do this. They could not get along at all. They took turns being CEO, and finally they said, that's it, we're selling it. Well, when they finally sold it, it broke a lot of hearts. And for the family, because it was a family business, their identity was wrapped into it. And when they no longer had the business, they were lost. They didn't know who they were. Right. And all the branches of the family went like this. And he said, to this day, Ginny, the cousins could all be standing in Starbucks and not know each other. They would not even recognize each other because they have become so dispersed. So having family businesses can just peter away if the family doesn't take time to become clear about who they are and what they care about. Yeah. So when do you begin this process? I like to say you begin this process as soon as possible, and definitely while you love each other.
While you love each other. Okay, that's a good one. While you
love each other, yeah. But if you don't love each other, it's still not bad. It's still a good thing to do. And how old do the people have to be in your family? I've worked with 14-year-olds. Now, it depends on who that 14-year-old is, but he was not to be left out.
Sure.
Because he was like, there's no way you all are going off and doing this retreat stuff without me.
Right.
And he stepped up. I mean,
Right.
stepped up in a big way. So impressed how he stepped up, this 14-year-old.
That's
So
great.
it depends on who it is. But, you begin at the very, you begin, sounds like Mary Poppins in the sound, no, Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music. You start at the very beginning.
Right.
You start at the beginning, right? You start
Right.
about the beginning, and I traditionally do interviews with every family member to find out what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what do they want, what their concerns are, and then you come together in a family retreat, and you share that information not by naming names, but by saying these are the high level themes that we're finding for the family. These are the things that your family wants to learn together. These are the things that your family want to work on together. So you can see it's more about these are the things, this is how we want to grow together.
Mm-hmm.
And without question, there's always some conflict. So you begin at the beginning, the interviews, the conversations about what it means. I like to work into the values after that and work our way through the process. It is not a step-by-step process. It's not like this meeting will do this and that meeting will do that. Every family is different.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very fluid, just depending on the nature of the family, the business, the organization, how nuanced it is. That there's so much that goes into it, and to the point of that conflict or that resistance that you might find from a generation that might say like, well, we haven't had to have this in the past. Why do we have to have it now? I read it in the article that you shared. There's this. One of the things that stood out to me was you said that these kinds of charters and this kind of governance, injects the courage to hold one another accountable within the family. Yeah. And, that's a powerful statement. And I think that's so important. But that resistance that you get from that, maybe they don't want to hold each other accountable. How do you change minds to make sure that this, like that if there's maybe in the next generation, there's just this push to want to get some structure in there. How do you change the minds of those that are resistant?
The only way I've been able to do that is slowly. It's a process. Jay Hughes has a great saying: "Hurry slowly," or and realizing it's families. What do they say? Businesses are on a shorter wavelength, and families are on a long wavelength. So you just start. And part of the thing you do with the older generation is you might say, okay, Dad, when you were doing this, let's say we had 4 kids. So there's 6 of us, mom, dad, us 4. Now these 4 have gotten married. So now the family is, 8 plus, so there's 10 people. Okay. So now we have 10 people, and not only 10 people, we have not just one nuclear family, we have 4 branches of this family. Right. And within these branches, now we got married, and now we have kids, and they got married and they have kids. So now the family is no longer, it started out at 6, is that right? 4 and 2, 6. It grew to, shoot.
I can't do the math either. We could say 12. Yeah, why not 12?
It grew to 10. It grew to 10. And now every single one of the families, those 4 families, now have 4 kids each. Yeah. And so you can start seeing how this branches out. So now you have 60 people in a family. Right. And you have 60 people who all feel entitled to be decision makers and entitled to get some of that money that's coming out of the family business. And how do we learn how to work together so that we can still be a family? Because if you were to go all the way back up to when maybe, let's say it was the great-great-grandfather, how many people were there? There were 3. Right. Right. How do you? It was easy for them to make decisions together, but the more people you have involved, the more complicated it gets. So part of this is about trying to keep the family together, because ultimately the family are the ones who can destroy the family business. Because if they do not agree, they can go about bringing down to collectively, or half of them can bring down the family business because they have power they may not know they have. And they also may be using power that they don't have, which is even more dangerous. If you have people using power that they think they have because of social media.
Right. Yeah.
It's a different day.
Yeah.
It's a different day.
Wow, that's so important. Yeah, ultimately, I mean, I think that should land, and it's probably a good place to tie a bow on this, because ultimately the family is the one entity that can destroy the family business. I think that's such an important point, and so we have to have these kinds of structures in place, the kinds of governance that Ginni and others like Ginni help to bring into families. So if you're struggling, if you're working through that process, or you're at a place where you think maybe you need to have some kind of organization around the family leadership or some kind of structure or governance, it's probably time to do that. And it's probably time to reach out to Ginni or somebody that can help you with that. So Ginni, how can people find you if they want to get in touch and maybe ask questions or maybe learn more about this?
Yeah, my company's Dynamics of Family Wealth, and the website is, well, it's not dynamic, it's dynamicsfamilywealth.com.
Okay.
So, and my email is Ginni, Ginni, at dynamicsfamilywealth.com. I'm happy to answer any questions because it's a process. It's a learning process, an educational process. It's a courage process. I have had people say, Ginni, the biggest gift you give to families is courage, because this work is so complex and it can be so scary. So having the courage to just begin is the first step.
That's so great. I'm so grateful for your time. We could have spent, we just scratched the surface on this subject, which is a very, very, very big subject that has a lot of nuance. And I think we could have gone for many hours, and I will have you back to maybe dig in deep on one of these subjects. But
especially on the family business side, the family business governance side, which is completely different from the family governance side.
Right.
So the family business governance is like, woo, what is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot. There's just so many things that you can, but as long as you're a family that is willing to make it yours and go through the process and inject your own values and hold each other accountable with courage, you can strengthen your family legacy and make it sustainable. So please visit dynamicsfamilywealth.com and reach out to Ginni at dynamicsfamilywealth.com. And Ginni, thank you so much for being here. This was very, very enlightening. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And everyone else out there, thank you so much for being here. We will see you next time. And make sure and share this with a friend if you got a lot from it and you think that they can too. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Fearless Family Business Show. If you're enjoying this show, please thumbs up this episode and subscribe wherever that subscribe button is. And you'll get more family business education and insights in your inbox. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, a colleague, a spouse, your mom, your dad, a second cousin, whomever you think might benefit from hearing this show. And if you're in a family business and you've got a great story to share, contact me, because I would love to see if you'd be a great fit for this show. I'd love to interview you. Or if you're struggling in your family business to find your unique identity or voice, or you need an injection of new life into your family business, I'd also love to hear from you. I'd love to learn more about you, and I'd love to see if I can help. Simply email me at adam@fearlessfamilybusiness.com, and we'll get you connected to the right place. Together, we can elevate the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle we all experience in our family businesses. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.